Welcome to Yarns from Down Under.
The Department of Malicious Compliance.
Aussie deployment.
The Van, an Aussie deployment yarn. G'day everyone. I've been a long time lurker in this sub, and I've been having a proper chinwag with myself about whether or not to post this. Reckon enough time's passed now, so she'll be right, but I'll still keep the names, dates and all the dramas vague. Apologies if the writing's a bit rough. It's my first proper go at a story post, but this one needed to be told right. Background: hot, dry and full of bludgers. Right, so the setup. I was chucked overseas for a year, right in the middle of a hot, dry country, the bloody Middle East. Everyone back home said, mate, the worst part'll be the boredom, nothing to do. That's how it was supposed to be for our mob too, but I'll tell you, she did not work out that way. If you don't know the drill, my platoon is just a small section in a massive division. We had an OIC, our idiot in command, assigned to our group. Now this bloke, he was a proper little overachiever, but only for himself. This OIC was always cooking up some mad-as scheme, some new exercise or op, just so he could tack an extra bullet point onto his yearly review. It meant we were always running around doing redundant, dog-of-a-job stuff. It's the military, so you expect a bit of that carry on, but this was next level. The problem with Captain Gung-Ho was that he'd take everything to the bloody extreme, and here's the kicker, he genuinely didn't know bugger all about our gear or what our jobs actually were. For a quick squiz, he'd tell us we had to finish Task A and gave us a fortnight. We'd tell him, listen mate, we need at least a month with the manpower we've got to do it properly. But nah, OIC would just blow us off and tell us to get it done in 2 weeks because he said so. Keep in mind, this fella wouldn't know our job from a bar of soap. A typical day started before the sun cracked the horizon. We'd be out there by 0400, trying to get a head start on the work before the heat of the desert turned truly lethal. We'd be tasked with something totally pointless, like building a temporary comms relay array in 3 separate locations in 1 week, just to prove our mobility. We'd tell the OIC, sir, the signal's already running through permanent fibre, and this is just wasting thousands in fuel and manpower. But he'd just radio back from his air-conditioned office, his voice crackling with self-importance. That's a negative, trooper. Initiative. Excellence. Get those bullet points. In the end, we did get Task A done, but we were pulling 24-hour shifts with 18-hour workdays for 3 weeks straight. The exhaustion was a heavy blanket. We'd eat cold rations in the back of the oven-hot steel coffins we called Humvees. And remember, that was all just so this tosser could pad his resume. No lives on the line, no actual mission, just pure ego. When we couldn't meet his impossible deadline, he'd dress us down and chew us out, calling us slackers who were dragging ass and saying it was absolutely unacceptable. It was like that, non-stop for the first 6 months. We were stuck in the boonies all day, setting the work site up, tearing it down, moving it to the next spot and setting up again. The worst bit was when the hot season hit. It was 35 to 45 degrees in the shade, or 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit for all you non-Aussies. We were stuck in non-air-conditioned Humvees in full Kevlar kit, moving heavy gear and pounding stakes into the bloody rock-hard ground all day, every day. I remember one particularly rough afternoon. Our newest bloke, Bluey, went down hard, just collapsed, white as a sheet, his body rejecting the heat. We had to chuck him onto a litter and drive him straight to the medical tent, praying he wouldn't turn crispy before we got there. And through all this, our glorious OIC was still chewing us out from his air-conditioned office. Fair dinkum, you wouldn't read about it. We were constantly told the shared pool of vehicles was too stretched, too vital for transport to give us anything with AC. The van. The turning point. Now all that crap was pretty rough, but this is just the classic military shit sandwich. But this is where the real yarn starts, the moment the penny dropped and the entire section nearly had an internal combustion. One day a new task dropped onto our section's plate, straight from the OIC himself. The order, clean out the section's assigned van. Everyone needs to do their part. The silence in the worksite tent was as thick as you could cut it with a knife. Then came the explosion of disbelief. We had a bloody van this whole time. Turns out The little rat didn't want to walk the half-mile to the DFAC every day, so he'd secretly commandeered our section van, the one with the crisp, cold AC, as his own bloody personal chariot. The only reason it came to light was because a high-up bigwig, some colonel from division, needed the van for a quick trip to the airport and asked why a perfectly good transport vehicle wasn't available for common use. The OIC got his tail caught in the mangle, and suddenly he needed us plebs to clean out the filth that he'd created while keeping it all to himself. People were absolutely irate. We had lads dropping from heat exhaustion, while this bloke was driving to his lunch in his personal sweat-free ride. Malicious compliance. Good on you, Ziz. I had a sergeant in charge of me, a real champion, who all call Sergeant Ziz. The bloke was a gym junkie and an absolute legend of a sergeant. When he heard the news, he called the platoon together for a quick corroboree. He knew exactly how he felt. Sergeant Ziz said the situation was unethical and he flat out refused to give us the order to clean the van. He looked at us and said, "I will not be sending my troops to do a job that was given to us from an ivory tower." So he and the other sergeant would do the task themselves. Sergeant Ziz and the other sergeant took the van straight to the PX on base. He stocked up with Q-tips, bin bags and cleaning gear. He then marched back and grabbed his JBL speaker, a proper loud one, and then parked the van right at the entrance of the division command tent. This bloke then blasted the army recruitment song at full volume while he and the other sergeant got stuck into the van cleaning it out with Q-tips. Seriously, they weren't just vacuuming, they were cleaning the tiny spaces between the vents, dusting the inside of the seatbelt buckles and polishing the plastic until it squeaked. A heap of the upper cadre, colonels, majors and other big bosses, stopped by wondering what the hell the commotion was. One colonel in a perfectly ironed uniform pulled up and demanded, "Sergeant, what is the meaning of this racket?" Sergeant Ziz, without missing a beat, snapping a salute, "Sir, just following the OIC's orders. He said this van used for essential transport be returned in pristine condition." The colonel just stared at the Q-tip in Sergeant Ziz's hand, then at the command tent, and just quietly walked away. Another major who stopped was told the same line, just a little louder. Not one person told him to stop. After 4 hours of that bloody army soundtrack, the van was pristine. Every little fleck of Middle Eastern dust was gone. We all thought that was the end of the funny business. We had a massive morale boost though, felt like we'd finally punted the bastard back into his corner. The aftermath. Space Marine 2 holiday. What happened next was a ripper and properly shocked us. The DOIC, the division's OIC, heard about some contention, some big argument about the van. Apparently some of the high brass were annoyed by the noise, and they also whinged that Sergeant Ziz wasn't available for a mission he was desperately needed on because he was stuck cleaning the van. The DOIC decided to look into what caused the whole debacle. The DOIC then held a town hall. Normally this is just boring admin stuff that takes an hour, but this one went for 5 bloody hours. The first sergeant was gobsmacked by the revelations. We lined up one after the other. We told him we hadn't had a proper day off since we hit the ground, how the OIC hadn't visited the site once, how he was reprimanding us for impossible timelines, and the stories of the heat injuries piled up. One of the cooks even stood up and mentioned they hadn't seen mail delivery for weeks because the OIC had been hogging the van that was supposed to run supply routes. The first sergeant was visibly enraged. He was seriously ticked off about how our OIC had handled everything. He looked us right in the eye and promised, "I'm gutted this happened under my watch. This bullshit stops today." He took all the information straight up the chain to the DOIC, and we were promised an action would be taken. Fast forward a week, and we hadn't heard a peep from OIC. This silence lasted for the rest of the deployment, 4 months. It's fair to assume he got a proper chewing out that probably cost him any chance of a promotion. The only reason he kept his job was probably because there was no one else on site to take it immediately, but his career was absolutely dead in the water. Every time we saw him, he looked like a sad, wet puppy. You could tell his deployment had gone completely pear-shaped. Usually the end of deployment is the busiest time for our section. Tons of gear to pack, organise and inventory. It's a massive workload. But after the nightmare of the first 6 months, those final 4 months felt like an absolute holiday. We did the necessary packing efficiently and properly, but instead of the usual round-the-clock slog, we had relaxed evenings. The relaxed workload timed perfectly with the release of Space Marine 2. We set up a few gaming consoles and spent the quiet nights bonding, playing the game, and forgetting the misery of the first half. Those last 4 months were bloody brilliant.
Thanks for watching another clip by Yarns from Down Under. If you enjoyed this clip, please hit the thumbs up, the subscribe button, and the bell. Another story from Yarns from Down Under will drop real soon. Cheers.